So what that means is in situations where in a situation where we will need to run low volume regression automatedly, it is actually not cost effective, right? Because the same costs or the same requirement that it will cost for you to actually implement an automated test for high volume regression would still be the same thing for low volume regression, right? But in the case of manual software testing, for example, if testers are actually charging according to the amount of screens that they are testing, right? So you would actually pay more for high volume regression, right, than low volume regression testing. We would look into regression testing also later. I don't know, maybe today or in the future. Okay, so this is still continuation of the difference. So with automated testing, all stakeholders can log in into the automation system and check the test execution results, right? While for manual tests are usually recorded in an Excel or Word or whatever tools that you're using to record your test results. And the test results are not readily available at a particular time. So you would have to wait for the tester to execute and record the test results. Why that of the automation tools? If you actually know your way around the system in which your team is using, you can easily go there and just click or run your test immediately and get the results back. Okay. So automated testing does not involve human consideration. So it can never give assurance of user friendliness or positive customer experience. Or you see, so that is the reason why we still need a bit of manual testing effort, right? But a manual testing, manual testing method allows for human observation, which will be useful for user-friendly systems and experience. Okay, so automation tests just run. It runs the scripts and tests against the requirements if the feature was actually developed or not properly, right? But in manual software testing, while testing against the requirements, we are also testing for the user interface and the user experience. We are not just testing for functionality. We are also testing for user experience and user interface. Okay. Then the performance tests like load tests, stress tests, spike tests, and etc. have to be tested by an automation test to compulsorily, of course. While performance test is not feasible for manual testing, right? So things like load testing, stress testing, load balancing, those spike testing, those kind of tests must be executed automatically, right? You would need automated tools to actually execute this kind of test. You cannot execute them manually because of these are tests that would require you to test the application beyond some limits. Okay. Why it's not feasible at all for manual testing. Okay. Please give me a moment. All right. Then parallel execution. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Someone. Okay. Testing can be executed on different operating platforms in parallel and reduce test execution time, right? So no matter, so if you write your test scripts, no matter the platform that you are using, as long as it was properly written, it will definitely be executed in different platforms. But manual testing can be executed in parallel, but would need to increase your human resources, which is expensive. Okay. So in this case, since for automation tests, it doesn't matter the platform which you are using, right? So if you write a test that would test that would actually be run in your UI or would run or would actually test your API, and this test is running in whatever cloud tool that you are using, it will run no matter the platform, right? While for manual testing, if you are actually executing manual software testing for different platform, you might not be able to actually run this parallel, right? So for example, if if executing a manual test on an application on mobile will actually require different efforts from executing that testing in web, right? And also, if you would actually test your API too, you would actually require testing tools like Postman for you to be able to manually execute or test your APIs, right? Then you can batch multiple test scripts for nightly execution, just like I said. I've said this earlier that you can actually set your test script to run at interval, right? If you are actually executing automation tests. So tests can run at interval depending on how you set the time, right? But this is actually not possible. You cannot batch your test manually if you are manually executing a test. Then for automated tests, you must actually have a knowledge of a programming language. So that is what you would use to actually write the test scripts. But you don't need any programming language knowledge for manual testing, right? So manual testing, you don't need any programming language. All the knowledge you need is knowledge of how to operate a computer. That's all you need. Automation test requires less complex test execution setup. Okay, it requires less complex test execution setup, right? Why manual testing needs have a more straightforward testing execution setup. No, automation tests require more complex tests. We need to also correct this. This requires more complex test execution setup, right? Because before you actually set up your automation test, you would need different kind of setup, both locally and remotely, right? So you need to properly set up your system, and this setup are actually complex. You need to have a good knowledge of how to go about setting up. For example, if you're using GitHub, setting up your GitHub actions to run properly. If you are using Bitbucket, set up your Bitbucket pipeline to run properly. If you are using CI/CD tools like Travis and the rest of them, set up your automated tools to run as expected, right? So engagement, of course, it's done by tools. It's accurate and never gets bored. While manual testing is repetitive, and of course, you can get bored while testing a particular thing over and over and over again, and it's also error prone, right? So automation testing is useful when frequently executing the same set of test cases. Manual testing proves useful too when the test case only needs to run once or twice, right? Then more differences between the both of them. So automation testing is useful for building for build verification testing, right? So when you are actually running your build in the cloud, so things like once you finish, once you actually if you things like there is a way you will set up your system. I'm trying to look for terminologies to use for those that may not be familiar. Then there's a way you set up your system, and once you finish executing or implementing your code in your local environment, which will be your computer, and you push this code to your cloud environment, right, to your cloud platform. Once you push that code, before that code is actually certified, right, some build tests would need to run to make sure that whatever you implemented locally has been properly tested and properly implemented, right? So in this case, automation test is actually very useful. Why executing build testing is very difficult and time consuming in manual testing? Well, in this case, right? In this case, what that means is whatever whatever features that you have implemented, right? You would need to make sure that every feature is actually properly implemented manually, right? So you make sure that you go through all the screens properly and verify that they don't have any error. So in for that of automated, this would run automatically, right, in the background, right? Verifying all the codes and making sure that everything is running properly. While automatically, this would be done, while manually, this would be done manually. You go through the UI step by step, screen by screen, making sure that everything is actually also working properly. Okay. Automated tests have zero risk of missing out of a pre-decided deadline, right? So once you implement your test script, it will always run. While manual testing, it may have high risk of missing a particular deadline in which if you have testers that are implementing user acceptance tests, so you might have the risk of missing a deadline of maybe a pre-launch if they are unable to actually cover or test all the different features step by step. Automation test uses framework like data drive, keywords, hybrid to accelerate the automation process. So like I said, automation tests would always require you to use tools and libraries, right? While manual testing does not require any framework. So but you may use guidelines and checklists to make sure that each feature or functionality that you are testing has been properly tested or has been properly tested, right? So you use your guideline or your checklist, or in this case, we also have the test cases documentation. So you make sure that once you are testing a particular feature, you are marking it on your test case. You are marking it as passed or as failed while you go through testing them one after the other. Then for documentation, automated test acts as a document page. Automated test acts. Okay. In the case of documentation for automated tests, you can provide a document. You can actually write down documentation on how to go about executing your test scripts and develop and whatever and whoever that is actually joining your team, right? As a new developer, as long as they have coding knowledge of or idea of how to actually implement the test, going through the documentation would actually be easy, or it will serve as a guide to actually know how to go about executing the existing tests, right? But for the case of manual testing, you necessarily do not need any documentation, because it's actually done manually. So whoever that is joining the team as a new manual software tester would only just need access to the test URL, and then the person can go ahead and execute the test using whatever test cases that has been documented, either previously or by the new tester. Automated unit tests enforce / drive test-driven development design. So what that means is in the case of automated tests, we can actually implement testing design like test-driven development design. Test-driven development design is a testing approach that we follow in which you write the test first with the intention that it will fail, and then you now implement the codes that will make the test pass, right? So in test-driven development, you implement your test first before writing your actual code. Okay, so in automated testing, we usually some teams would would actually implement test-driven development design in their team while actually writing automated unit tests or even integration tests. Why a manual unit testing or a manual test, you can't actually implement any any design or any test design because you are not writing any code and your testing is done manually, right? So for automated test helps in build verification testing it's an integral part of the DevOps cycle. So DevOps cycle, like I have mentioned some DevOps tools like GitHub Actions and Travis CI, where you would actually configure these tools properly for them to actually accept your test and code, and your test will actually run on these tools in the cloud properly, testing or running against your code, right? Why manual testing defeats the automated build principle of DevOps. In manual testing, you don't actually need to work with any DevOps tools, right? So it's done manually. So automated testing is suited for regression testing, performance testing, load testing, or highly repeatable functional test cases, right? Why manual testing is suitable for exploratory usability testing, ad hoc testing. It should also be used where the UAT changes frequently. Okay. Okay. I think these are the difference between manual testing and automated testing. Do we have any questions so far before we proceed?
Yes, I have a question. Good afternoon or good morning.
Hi.
So if the manual testing has so many deficiencies, or so to speak, why are we still learning it? I mean, just asking.
So manual testing might have deficiency, but it's actually very, very important, right? And it's actually the kind of testing that introduces you as a beginner to software testing. So as a beginner with no programming experience, unless you have programming experience, as a beginner, you would always want to start with manual software testing. You would always want to start with manual software testing, introduce yourself with know how to document test cases, write test plan, execute tests manually. Then from there, you now build your skill to automation, right? So, but even as an automated software tester, QA or quality analysis is still done manually still. So no matter the deficiency of manual software testing, it is still very, very important, because there are some, like I said, automation tests run automatically. It will test the code against requirements. But manual testing also look into, it doesn't just look at testing the feature against the requirements. It also look into testing both the user interface and the user experience too. And this cannot be done automated, right? Okay. Yeah, Nancy, please.
Well, I probably don't need to ask you my question because it's also in line with what he asked, but I wanted to narrow it down to regression testing.
Okay.
Because if we say that automated testing is best suited for regression testing, that would that mean that we don't stand a chance? Because even for manual testing jobs that you even for manual testing jobs or automated testing jobs, there's always the question about regression testing. So even as a manual tester, correct me if I'm wrong, there will always be the question of regression testing coming up. So does that mean that if you're just a manual tester still preparing to, go into the software testing, automation testing world, that you don't start a chance because you probably don't have the skills, the automated skills for writing regression testing scripts?
Yeah. So when it comes to regression testing, it's actually done both manually and automated. So regression testing is actually, we will look into it in the future, but let me just define it here so that we'll have an idea, right? It's actually testing an application. So when it's actually testing an application to make sure that newly added feature doesn't have any adverse effects on already existing features, right? So if we build feature A and feature A is working properly, and we now build feature B, and feature B is supposed to interact with feature A, we will have to perform a regression test, testing both feature B and feature A to make sure that the newly added feature B does not have a negative effects or on the existing feature A. So it can be done both ways, both manually and automatedly, right? So whether you're a manual tester or a regression tester, you would actually need to know how to perform regression tests. Okay, Iniabom is asking about TDD, but didn't behavioral BDD is behavioral driven design, right? Behavioral behavioral driven design is it can actually be implemented in just not only in programming or development. It's actually really wide. That's why I didn't go into it. So I was just focused on test-driven design because test-driven design is more focused on testing and development.
Okay, sorry.
Go on, please.
Yeah, why I asked is that you talked about test-driven design as it relates to automation, test automation, and that it does not relate to manual testing manually. That it cannot be done manually. Then so I was asking that, and you didn't also speak on behavioral driven design, whether it is also implemented only in test automation or it also applies in manual testing.
Okay.
So that's why I brought it up. Because you just said that behavioral driven designs is large, is broad, it spans a large scale of stuff. But now I'm saying that I'm trying to ask is these are two different design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Behavioral driven design too would majorly be applicable. It will majorly be applicable in automated testing, not manual testing, right? Because it's actually a kind of development paradigm that actually it actually emerged from the test-driven design itself, right? So because of course it actually combines more of the test-driven design more, right? So it would actually be more effective if we want to talk about it in automated testing than manual software testing. All right. Do we have more questions?
Sorry, I wanted to ask, but if it's going to come up later in the training, you can skip it. But I wanted to ask if you could throw more light on build verification testing.
Build verification testing. Okay. Like I'm not sure it's going to come up in the future because it's more of automated testing. So like I said, in build verification testing, it's actually okay. Let me try my best and put it in a way that it will be properly understood. Now, when we finish executing, or implementing a code, right? Locally, right? We write a code, we write the test, and then we push it. If those of you that have an idea of version control, right? Version control is actually using tools like Git to actually version your code and the changes that you make in your code. Okay, so when we are done implementing the code or implementing the feature and we write a test for it, if that is the case, and we actually deploy this, no, not deploy, and we actually push to maybe let's say GitHub, right, where it would particularly now in some development team or in most development team, once you actually push your code to the cloud to GitHub, you will raise a pull request where your code will be reviewed, right? But then while you raise your pull request and while you are waiting for your code to be reviewed before it gets merged to the main branch, right? So there are some automated tests that you would have implemented that will run the build remotely, right? It will run and it will make sure that all the different test scripts or deployment scripts that you have locally, different workflow and files that you have implemented, they are all working as expected, right? So if you have end-to-end tests implemented, it will run the end-to-end test scripts against the build. It will run your unit test scripts against the build. It will run your integration test scripts. It will run your service test scripts if you have that. It will run the different test scripts that you have against the build, making sure that the new feature that you added or you implemented, you actually implemented it right. It does not break the build, right? This would be done remotely or in the cloud or in whatever version control tools that you are using, be it GitHub or Bitbucket or whichever one that you're using. But it will run there. So if you have a particular build, if one particular build fails, it will show you the sign that it failed. Let me share my screen. Let me just show you guys something.